Hey everyone, it is Aki from Parenting Paths, and this is just a quick course. Well, maybe not that quick. It's probably going to be about 30 to 45 minutes. And it's a course to learn about your parenting, positive parenting strategies. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn my heater off because it's making a little noise. So I'm going to share my screen with you in a minute, but basically just so you know what you're getting into, these are strategies that you can add to your tool belt that are really different from traditional disciplines. So you may be using things like timeout or sticker charts or even begging or pleading with your child. And what we're going to do is talk about why those may not be the best strategies, and also talk about things that you can use instead that are going to build connection to your child, that are going to get them behaving better, and that you can actually really feel good about. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Sorry guys, just give me one sec. There we go. I hope you can see that. So let's get started. You probably know who I am if you're watching this, but I'm Aki Reamer, and I am a positive parenting coach. I am also a life coach for parents. So I help people to parent with more confidence and connection. I help parents get on the same page about how they want to parent their kids. And I also help people design a life that feels really good for them. And so rather than trying to get through each day and just trying to survive, what we do is we work together to come up with a strategy that's going to really help you to develop tools that you feel really good about, that are going to lead to major change, and also that are going to help you to live the best life that you can. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's think about first the questions that most of us ask. So often when we have children, or when I work with children, or even for myself, sometimes I found myself asking these questions, right? How do I make my child follow directions is a pretty common one. How do I make my kid understand no? How can I make my child listen to me? And how do I make this problem stop? Probably in some form or another, these are the most common questions that I get. So let's think about this. What does the term discipline actually mean to you? When we hear the word discipline here in the West, we usually think of making a child feel bad in order to make them be good, right? So often it's about, how do we make this child behave? How do I make my kid feel so bad about what they've done that they will never do it again? Well, I don't know about you, but I know that when I was punished as a child, when I was sent to my room, when I was perhaps put in a timeout or privileges taken away, I didn't actually necessarily think, gosh, thanks mom and dad for doing that for me. I thought, wow, I felt angry, I felt upset, and I didn't necessarily change what I was doing. If I did, it was because I was afraid of getting punished, or it was because I felt like, I might have felt like, what's wrong with me? I might have also gotten a little bit sneaky, right? A lot of kids, you may remember this as a child. Well, I know I'm not supposed to have dessert, but I'm just going to sneak it. That way, if they don't find out, I won't get in trouble. Not the greatest. So yeah, traditional discipline is really about making children behave. So here are some strategies that people tend to use, right? Shaming and lecturing, yelling, punishment or reward. It might be things like, I will give you a sticker for your sticker chart. I will buy you an ice cream if you behave. Timeouts, that's a really, really common one. Physical force or fear, so things like spanking, smacking, those are things that maybe are less prevalent, but definitely still around. And then taking things away, right? If you don't behave, I'm going to take away your TV time. Those are all pretty traditional strategies. I want to back up for a minute and say, if you have or if you do use any of these, you are definitely not alone. This isn't a judgment call, so it's not time to beat yourself up. It's really about learning new skills and maybe understanding a little bit about why these aren't the greatest strategies. They are really common. So here's some other common strategies that I see quite a lot, right? And I don't know if we'd even call this discipline. It's avoiding conflict by not addressing things. So it's like, I know my kid's going to have a temper tantrum, so I'm just not going to set that limit right now. Pleading, bribing, giving in, babying, and rescuing, right? These are all really common in our society, especially because it's hard to see our kids be upset. So I see this quite a bit. Again, if you do it, don't feel bad. Just know, by the end of this, you will know why maybe it's not the greatest, and you'll have some other tools in your tool belt. So my question is really, do you ever feel like your biggest parenting goal is to just get through the day, right? When you're using traditional discipline and trying to control your child, that can be really exhausting. How do I make my kid behave? Oh my gosh, what is wrong with them? What is wrong with me? I just can't wait until the day is over. When is this kid going to go to bed, right? It can feel really hard and it can feel really tiring. And so, what we want to do is shift away from just trying to survive and really want to figure out how to both help our child to thrive, but also help us to thrive. Parenting is a big deal. So the goals for today really are to get in touch with what feels right for you. So somebody else may be watching this and come up with a completely different way of doing things or ways that they're going to implement these strategies. What I want you to do is really keep in mind who is your kid and who is your family as we do this. We're going to have a little bit of a crash course in getting clear on your goals and values, right? Learn concrete skills for parenting through connection. So that's a really important piece too. What do you actually do? At the end of this conversation or at the end of this video, what I want you to do is walk away and go, oh, okay, I have real tools that I can start using right away. And finally, leave with actionable tools that you can start using. Just said that. If you are watching this, you probably got a piece of paper that had all of the tools that we're going to talk about laid out for you. And so when you leave, you can use that piece of paper and you'll be able to reference that to understand what it is that you're going to do from now on or try to do. All right. So the first kind of silly thing that I'm going to do is actually ask you to make a fist with one hand and try to open it with the other. Now, if there are more than one of you watching, it's even better if one of you can make a fist and the other person try to open the fist. Do that without really hurting the other person, but see if you can do that or yourself, right? So I'm doing it with my own fist. I can't even open my own fist. And the reason that I have people do this is because it's really about control, right? We can't, if you imagine that the fist is your child, whatever your child wants, and your hand is the one that is trying to open the fist, it's impossible. Now, occasionally when I do this in a big room full of people, I'm going to turn my heater on, so I'm sorry if it makes sounds, but it's a little cold. When I do this in a big room full of people, sometimes people are able to open somebody else's fist. And when I ask how they did it, there will be two ways that they did it. One is they go, oh, well, I just asked them to do it and they opened it for me. So yeah, if you are connected or you present yourself in a way that's like, hey, could you please do that? There's a chance that your child will cooperate. It's about connection, right? So that's the first piece that we want to take into account. The second piece is sometimes they'll say, well, I tickled the person. Often if they came together or they knew each other before the talk, hopefully, the person will tickle them or make them laugh somehow. And that kind of makes the other person relax. They're able to open their fist, right? And so that's the other piece that's important to keep track of, that you can actually use humor and fun and silliness to get things done as well. But really, most of the time, people cannot open the fist. Now let's imagine that this is something that, you're trying to get a child to do. And let's talk about traditional discipline and what that might look like. I love that picture. Isn't it so cute? I know it went around the internet for a while there. All right, so let's think. Does any of this work? Shame. So if I were to use shame to get someone to open their fist, I might say, you're being such a baby. Big kids know how to open their fists, right? Like, what's wrong with you? Shame. Bribery. If you open your fist, you can have a sticker for your cooperation chart. If you open your fist, I'm going to get you an ice cream cone, right? Time out. You go sit in the naughty chair until you can open your fist and think about what you're going to do next time, right? Don't get up until I tell you you can get up. That's time out. Threats. If you don't open your fist right now, you won't get a bedtime story, or open your fist right now or you'll get a spanking. And finally, pleading. Right? We talked about some of those other strategies that people use. Please open your fist. You would make me so happy. Oh, that would be such a nice thing for you to do. So it's kind of silly, right? If you look at it from that perspective. We do it all the time with our kids. The point is you can't make anyone do anything, including small children. And it's also really important to remember that our kids are like little social scientists. They're always trying to gather information about the world and figure out how does it work. How does my parent or my caregiver respond when I do this, that, or the other thing? Do I matter in the world? What about my ideas, right? So all of these things they're gathering information about. And in fact, in the first few years of life, their brains are even changing in response to their environments. And this isn't meant to scare you. It's actually a great opportunity. So for example, if a child feels like they're heard, if they feel like their emotions are okay to express, if they learn new ways of expressing those emotions in ways that are okay, that's going to really affect the way that their brains are even built physically, and that's going to have an impact on the rest of their lives. Pretty cool. The other thing I want to mention really quickly is if you have a young child, or if you used to have a young child, if you remember when your child was very young, there are a few things that little kids have control over, right? As kids get older, or when we're dealing with adults, we generally can't pick them up and move them from place to place, or pick them up and do things to them and make them do things. But when our children are young and little, we can actually move them. We can take them where we want them to go. We can do all of these things, right? But very little kids have the autonomy around eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom. Now, if you think about it, what are the challenges that parents have most with really young kids? Eating, sleeping, going to the bathroom, right? Why? Because kids are asserting control over their world, and that is something that they absolutely have control over. So it's worth thinking about. What if we let kids have control that's acceptable? Would that mean that they wouldn't feel like they had to be as rigid? All right. So, these traditional forms of discipline, shaming, blaming, punishment, babying, they might work in the moment, right? But it's really weird because people will sometimes say, well, I have to use force, or I have to use traditional discipline, or I had to yell. My kid was about to run into the street. Would you let your child run into the street next time because you put those practices into place? Doesn't really change the behavior next time, right? You're doing the same things over and over and over and over again. And little kids learn from experience. Big kids learn from experience, but adults, we tend to do the same thing over and over and over again because we're just too busy to sit down and go, maybe I need to rethink this. So let's talk about how we can actually think about these things so that you can start to teach life skills. These interactions that you have with your children can actually be an opportunity to teach them life skills, which is pretty fabulous. I know I keep reaching over. It's very cold in the room that I'm in, and I've got this heater right next to me, and I'm like turning it up and down, so please excuse me. Finally, the question is, even if the method works in that moment, is it nurturing your relationship or hurting it? Is it helping you to grow closer to your child? Are you letting them know that you're there for them no matter what? Are you letting them know that you accept them for who they are, or are you hurting your relationship with them? Does that become the focus? Does getting into power struggles become the focus of your time with them and these discipline measures rather than teaching? I want to say that traditional discipline may not be about this, but the word discipline actually means to teach. And so what we want to do is shift to teaching our children, acting as a guide for how to be in the world. Not only is punishment not necessarily something that works, it's actually detrimental. So here are the kind of 4 R's of punishment, right? The first one is resentment. The idea, this is so unfair. I can't trust adults at all. Right? If you get punished and you feel like that punishment was unwarranted or it doesn't feel fair, the focus becomes, this is not fair. I can't trust you. Revenge, right? They're winning now, but I'm going to get even. Oh yeah, you want to do that to me? Well, let me just make your life really hard. Rebellion. I'll just do the opposite to prove that I don't have to do it their way. Some of these might sound familiar from when you were a kid. Retreat. So either sneakiness, the idea that, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm just not going to get caught, or reduce self-esteem, which is, I'm a bad person, or what is wrong with me? Why can't I do these things that my parents are expecting of me? I'm trying so hard, right? Sometimes that's the case too. And finally, just if you have very young children, toddlers, babies, preschoolers, they might not even get why things are going on. They might just feel confusion, fear, and mistrust. So remember the questions we asked at the beginning, right? They're really common questions. How do I make my child follow directions? How do I make my kid understand no? How can I make my child listen to me? And how do I make this problem stop? All about making. Come on in, Kitty. You can tell that I'm just making this video for you at home. So lots of home things may happen. All right, so we're going to talk about changing our questions. How do we change our questions? Let's start by changing them to, how do I help my child? Let's stop trying to make them do anything. How do I help my child learn respect, cooperation, and problem-solving skills? How do I help my child feel belonging and a sense of significance? How do I get into my child's world and understand her developmental processes? How do you actually understand what's appropriate for your child? It's not fair to ask a child to do something they're not developmentally able to do. How can I use problems as opportunities to learn for both myself and my child? All good questions and all a wonderful starting point. Now, if you're someone who wants to know, what does the science say about all this stuff anyway, right? What does science say about being kind or permissive versus being firm, strict? So science has looked at this. They've done studies on what it looks like, and they call it authoritarian when a family or a parent is very, very strict. There are lots of rules, and basically what they found that when a family or a parent is very firm, very strict, lots of rules, it tends to alienate kids and creates rebellion, unhealthy perfectionism, and low self-esteem. Let's talk a little bit more about that really quickly. First of all, alienates kids by not being connected to the kids, right? If you're constantly trying to control your children and saying, what you're doing is not okay, and here's all of the ways I want you to do things, and if you don't do things my way, if it's my way or the highway, that is a very, that's a way of saying, hey, I am only going to accept you if you are perfect, which creates often perfectionism in kids. There's a lot of anxiety about not performing and being quite perfect, or low self-esteem, right? So just not feeling very good about themselves. That's the other thing that can happen. What I find often in working with clients and in working with kids is that with very young kids, they might go with the flow and be very good about following rules and following directions, but as they get older, they might start to rebel. And so it's really, even if your child if this is working for your kid on its own, it's not a very enjoyable way to be in community with your family, right? Like there's not a lot of love flowing back and forth. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what about being really kind to your child, permissive? Oh, honey, you can do whatever it is that you want. Lots of people do that too. There's a kitty cat next to me crunching around on a paper bag, so sorry. I hope you can hear me still. But anyway, being kind without limits or being permissive causes spoiled kids laziness and risk-taking behavior. So if you think about it, if a child is told you can do whatever it is that you want to do, no, you don't have to do that chore. Oh, I'm going to rescue you from whatever hard thing happens. Let me take care of that for you. That's a real recipe for creating kids who don't know how to handle limits later on in life, for creating kids who are very spoiled, right? Because they always get what they want. Imagine what that's like to go out into the world, even if you think you're doing your kid a favor by being super nice to them. What is it like to go out into the world where that's not the way it works? And risk-taking behavior, right? Because if I'm not getting any limits placed on me, then I'm just going to try all sorts of different things. Excuse me, my kitty. Shakes, I'm going to move you out of the way. That's my old kitty, Shakes. She is really into this paper bag. So sorry, guys, but I'm going to move it out of the way. We're doing some projects around the house, and it's a paper bag and a crinkly shopping bag that she wanted to crawl into. Sorry about that. Okay. Gosh, it's just like we're in our in my living room, isn't it? Just talking together. I hope this is okay. All right. So here's a question for you: kind versus firm. A lot of people may fall into one or the other. Being really permissive, oh honey, whatever it is that you want to do, or really strict, my way or the highway, these are the rules in our house. However, probably even more common than that is flip-flopping back and forth. So it may be that you spend time with your child and you just love your kids so much, you want them to be happy. There's nothing like the smile on your child's face. And so maybe what you do is you say, oh honey, we're going to do anything you want today. We're going to have a really special day. We're going to go to the park. We're going to get ice cream. We're going to do whatever you want. And then what ends up happening often is that what we were talking about happens, right? The kid gets a little bit entitled and goes, oh, well, I get whatever I want. And you can't really blame them if they're getting whatever they want, but it can be really frustrating for parents. So what ends up happening often is that the child becomes very demanding. They don't seem appreciative. And so the parent gets very frustrated, and then, bam, when they can't take it anymore, they get really strict. That's it. That kid is really spoiled. I'm not going to let them act that way. You know what? Forget it. These are the rules. You better follow the rules. what happens then? Often the parent goes, oh, I feel really bad. I'm being too hard on my kid. I can't stand myself. I should be much nicer. Whoop, all the way back to the other direction again. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. You know what? Let me take you out to make up for it. Let's do all of these extra things. And then the cycle continues, flip-flopping back and forth from kind to firm, right? Really common. Whenever I give this, whenever I share this information in a room full of people or do group coaching or something, lots of nodding happening here. And I also want to, again, say before we go further, this is not about beating yourself up or finding out all the things you're doing wrong, because these are things that are a process. I actually happen to do this all the time. I have to remind myself, these are things that even with all of the work that I've been doing over the years, I have to remind myself, hey, you know what? I don't have to flip-flop back and forth. And I mess up all the time, and you're going to mess up too. And so one of the things that you can do that is really important, actually, is to have grace for yourself. So I'm asking you to have a little grace for your child and think, okay, sometimes your kid is going to mess up and you want to respond with empathy and connection and love. Do the same for yourself. You are going to mess up, and that is okay. And if we can create opportunities to learn from our mistakes, that's going to be a great thing that you can do for yourself and a great thing to model for your kid. All right. So let's rethink discipline. What is positive discipline? What are the strategies that we can use to be both kind and firm at the same time? It really is possible. Rather than flip-flopping back and forth or being, strongly in one camp or the other, what we want to do is become parents who can be both kind and firm at the same time, who can both set limits and be loving at the same time. And research actually shows that when we have high expectations for our kids, right? Setting limits for them, asking them to perform at a high level, but then we also give them connection, we give them the tools they need, we give them support. Those are the kids that go on to be much more successful in the world. So really important to teach that. Let's talk about how. What does it look like? Now, you probably have this handout. I shared this with you. Hopefully, if you don't have it, you can email me at aki@parentingpaths.com, aki@parentingpaths.com, and I'm happy to share it with you. But here are the tools for transformational parenting. Now, on the first page or on the front of the printout is this little chart, and these are the 12 strategies that I'm going to share with you today. On the back of it, or on the second page when you print it out, are examples of what that actually means. And so the nice thing about this is if you forget what you're doing, which is often the case, right? We learn strategies, they sound good to us, and then it's like in the moment when our kids are pushing all of our buttons, we forget what they mean. You'll be able to look at this and learn how to use all of these. So let's talk about each of these strategies. The first one I want to share with you is actually a pretty important one and a really kind of overlooked one often, and that is set your kids up for success. Okay? So what can you do? What can you control? That's what set them up for success is. Rather than thinking about, oh, my kid is doing everything wrong, it's really challenging, they're doing this and that. What can you control? Examples. Really simple ones, like, is your child well fed and rested? Does your kid have information about what's expected, right? So like if we're going to go to dinner with someone, if I just take my kid and they don't really know what to expect, I can't really be upset with them if they're not behaving. But if I say to my child in the car, you know what, we're going to go out to dinner. This is a kind of a fancy dinner. It's at a restaurant. So this person and this person and this person are going to be there. And we are not going to get up and run around at the table. But if you get bored, here I brought like a little bit of a bag of some stuff that you can do, like your coloring stuff, right? Those are what I'm talking about. If I let my kid run around with their friends at a restaurant yesterday, and then I take them out to another thing and I think, oh, my kid is totally misbehaving, well, that's not fair. They don't really know what to expect. So it's really important that you let your child know what's coming up and what to expect. Does your kid know how to be successful, right? Like I said, what it means is, in this particular example that I gave, it's like, hey, make sure that you are staying at the table. If you have an older child, it could be something like, yes, you can use the car, but, you need to be back by 9 p.m. if you want to be able to use it again, right? Letting your kid know what to expect. And another piece that's often overlooked, are you well rested and ready? Are you doing the things that you need to do in order to be able to have patience, in order to be able to get through the day okay? So are you staying up all night watching movies? Or are you getting enough rest that in the morning you're okay? Or for me, an example of this was, in the mornings was really hectic, and I thought, oh gosh, my kid is just taking forever. Well, actually, I was checking my emails and doing a lot of work in the morning right before I took her to work. And as soon as I actually cut that out, I started getting up 10 minutes earlier to have coffee on my own, get into my body, not look at the computer. That made a huge difference in my own patience and in the way that our mornings went. So what can you control? Let's set them up for success. Now, before I go on, I just want to say you can pause this video after each tool that I share and maybe write down for yourself if you have any ideas. So maybe you can write down here, what can I control? If there's something that's really feeling hard for you right now with your child's behavior, what are the things that you can do to maybe set them up for success? All right, the next one is offer choices. So this is one that we hear a lot. Now, we talked earlier about autonomy and kids wanting to feel like they're in control. Remember the fist thing? Now, if I were to offer a choice, that might look very different. So I might say something like, oh, do you want to hold this phone or this mug? Open the fist. The fist opens without me saying, open your fist. Right? So what it does is it gets the brain to do something other than focusing on the no. Right now I'm focusing on no, I'm not going to let you open my fist. But if you say, hey, do you want to hold this or this? Or here, catch this. Like if I'm asking you to solve a problem or to make a choice, the brain goes to solving that problem. Here's an example, right? Do you want the cheese crackers or the salty ones? Should I get the apples or the pears first? Do you want to walk and hold the cart or sit inside the cart? Do you want to jump like a bunny or swing your trunk like an elephant while we go down the aisles? Sometimes kids need to be allowed to say no. I just added that on because sometimes people will say, oh, I try not to say no to my children. I don't want them to say no. Why? Because no is a pretty powerful word, and a lot of toddlers and young kids use it a lot. But give them opportunities to say no. Do you want peanut butter on your toast? No? Okay, no problem. Allow acceptable ways for them to have control. It's really important because otherwise they're trying to get control all over the place. And developmentally appropriate kids who are developmentally typical, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is it is developmentally appropriate for all kids, right? Whether neurotypical or not, to test their limits, figure out how the world works, have their own ideas, figure out how to actually get people to let them have control. Totally normal, maybe frustrating, but very normal and very much something we want to see. All right, the next one is ask questions. So ask questions. It's similar to choices, but if you think about it, every one of these tools actually is based on the idea that we want to teach life skills. So asking questions is sort of the idea, or sort of the tool is, how do you help your child to become a good problem solver, right? With adults, we want them to be able to solve problems as they come up and not get paralyzed by the problem or combust and freak out, right? So this is the practice for that. Instead of saying, put your jacket on right now, you might say, it's cold in here. How can you get warm, right? Get your kid to answer that question. Or instead of at the grocery store, I said only one item, you could say, oh, there's so many yummy choices. Which one are you going to get, right? Stop playing with that jar of spaghetti. I did a lot of these thinking about the grocery store for some reason. I think one of my clients was struggling with that. You could say something, where can you put that glass jar so it doesn't break, right? So what I'm doing is asking the child to have a thought process that solves a problem. And what I'm doing there is not only giving them the practice of solving problems, but also saying, hey, I trust you. I trust your judgment. Respect the emotion and honor the impulse. This is a big one too. We so often tell our kids what they can't do. Let's try telling them what they can do. So knowing that all feelings are okay, not all actions are, right? Kids need to be taught acceptable ways to express their emotions. oh, this cut off. But for an example, instead of saying, no, I told you, no hitting, right? Let's say a child hits their sibling. Instead, I might say, oh, you're so mad that he took your ball from you and you hit him, right? And then I would say, well, when you're mad, you can stomp around, you can hit a pillow. So what I'm doing is I'm telling them what it is that they can do to get that anger out, for example. Or if a baby is throwing food off their high chair, that impulse is to throw food. Why? Oh, gravity is super interesting. Seeing what adults around you do is super interesting. When you throw your food, that's a lot of power. So how do you give your child the opportunity to throw something and learn those things and use their body in those ways, in acceptable ways? It might be saying, food's all done now because you're throwing your food and we don't throw food, but let's go throw a ball around, right? So that's honoring the impulse. How do you be kind and firm at the same time? We talked about that. Kind and firm at the same time is not about just being a pushover, right? Positive discipline, often people will hear that and think it means, do whatever you want, kid. It's not like that. It's about how to be both kind, both connected, empathetic, and firm. Set limits at the same time. By being kind to my child and being empathetic and loving, I'm showing respect for my child. By setting a limit, I'm requesting that they show respect for me, right? And those are both equally important. Here are examples. I know you really want ice cream, but in our house, we eat dessert after dinner. Sorry, right? I'm not saying, no, stop asking for ice cream, you little brat. That's how many times do I have to tell you? And I'm also not saying, oh, okay, well, you really want ice cream, you can have ice cream. What I'm saying is, I know you really want it. Bummer, we don't have it before dinner. Another example, this is so hard, but when you kept throwing sand at your friend, you were telling me that you need to come out of the sandbox. So let's try again tomorrow. Again, being loving, being empathetic, but also setting the limit and following through. I know you want to go back into the store, but we're going to sit in the car until you're ready to sit in the cart, right? You just let me know when you feel like you can handle it. If my child is completely being nuts at the grocery store, then I might say, hey, you know what? We're going to take a break in the car until you can handle being in the grocery store, as opposed to like just getting very, very angry or just letting my child run all around the store. First then, really powerful. First then is the idea that there is a natural rhythm or a routine to the day. So it's not about, I will give you a sticker if you do this, I will give you dessert. For example, the difference between first then and sort of traditional bribing is, oh, if you behave, I'm going to give you an ice cream. Instead, it would be something like, well, first you need to eat your dinner and then you can have dessert, right? Not if you eat your dinner, you can have dessert. It's not a bribe. It's just a natural way of being. So here are examples. First, we'll get the veggies and then you can pick your cereal at the grocery store. First, I'm going to order the deli meats and then you can get out of the cart and walk. First, you need to eat your snack and then we will open the juice. It's about having a rhythm. All right. Act, don't talk. Decide what you will do and follow through. Big one. Okay. When our kids misbehave, we often blah, 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 blah. Honey, that wasn't okay. It's not very nice to do that. How many times do I have to tell you? You sit here and do this and that and the other thing. If you don't stop doing this, I'm going to do that. Stop doing that. Too many words are not good. So decide what you will do and follow through consistently. First of all, don't make threats that you aren't going to follow through on. And second of all, let's try not to make threats at all, right? But instead, come up with a plan for how you're going to react to something and then do it without talking. Example, stop threatening, bargaining, and begging. Let kids know expectations ahead of time. Like I said, let's talk about an example that I often give. So if your child likes to run ahead of you when you're walking down the street and they're young and it's not okay, rather than saying, oh, honey, don't run ahead. That's not okay. Please don't run ahead. Or saying, that's it. You know what? We're not going to go to the park ever again, or you have to sit in the stroller. Instead, what I'm going to do is say what I'm going to do and then follow through. I'm going to say, you know what? It's not okay for you to run ahead because it's not safe. So I've decided that if you run ahead, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to hold you the rest of the way, or I'm going to put you in your stroller, or we're going to hold hands. I don't really care what you pick, but that's an example. Then next time my child runs ahead, I go, oh, you know what? Remember what I said? I'm just going to hold your hand now. Another example might be something like, I've decided that if you pull my hair, let's say you have a kid who pulls hair because they're upset. If you pull my hair, I'm going to put you down because it's not safe for my body to let you do that. Kid pulls your hair, you go, oh, you pulled my hair. I'm just going to keep my body safe. So again, I'm being both kind and firm at the same time. I'm not punishing and being mean, but I'm definitely setting that limit. And I'm doing it consistently every single time. This is so, 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 so powerful. Things that I work on clients with where they have been working on something for a really long time, if we can just come up with a strategy that works really well and that parents can feel good about and that they can consistently do, it can make very rapid and very powerful changes for a family. Say what you see. Say what you see is pretty important too. Let's talk about what that is. So often our kids misbehave. Maybe we hear of kids fighting with each other. We'll go in and we'll tell them, hey, that's not okay. That's your fault. I'm going to put you in timeout. Blah, 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 right? Instead, just say what you see. I call it sportscasting or narrating. I didn't come up with that, but there's sportscasting. Michael and Nora, you're both trying to take the truck from each other. If two kids get into a fight and I wasn't in the room, I have no idea what happened before I showed up. And so this is really important and much better if I can go and just go say, oh, you both are trying to take the truck from each other. Or what should we do about that, right? As opposed to me coming in and deciding who was the victim and who was the good kid and who was the bad kid and how we solve it. It's about building those problem-solving strategies. You don't want to take sides if you can help it. Be really genuine. So no empty praise. We talk, I've got lots of resources around all of this stuff, so I don't want to take too long on any one thing, but we don't want to praise our kids and say, good job, good job, good job, good job, all the time. We want to be really present. So say what you see in that particular situation would be like if your child draws a drawing for you, instead of saying, oh, look at this drawing. Oh, it's so beautiful. Wow, you are the best artist ever. I might say, you draw a lot of blue lines on this paper. Now that might feel really weird at first, but think about it. If you had me over for a meal or something and I was like, oh, wow, this is the best meal. Oh my gosh, this is the best ever. You are the best cook ever. That doesn't feel genuine. But if I say, wow, this is a really interesting recipe. How did you come up with it? What is this spice in here? What does that do? It creates an opportunity for real connection. You know that I'm really here and you can engage in conversation with me. And so we want to give that to our children too. Focus on solutions. Rather than punishment, focus on solutions. What are we doing? We're teaching our children how to be in the world, like I said. So let's say that a child hurts another child. Rather than saying, you're in timeout, you're bad, you want to say, oh, you really hurt Ella. Should we go see what we can do to help her feel better? Right? What does that do? That teaches the child, hey, I'm on your team. You did something bad, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. And let's see what we can do to help them. So it's very similar to an adult doing something wrong and taking responsibility and following through all the way. It might look like you both want to use the clay. How can we solve this problem? Again, I'm focusing on a solution. And you'll be amazed. I teach a class with really young kids who are able to come up with solutions often. 2, 3-year-olds. So I might say, oh, you both want to play with this dolly. What should we do about that? And often one child will hand it to another or go find another toy that the other child will want to play with. So if 2-year-olds can do it, your older children can do it too. Now, if you haven't been using these ways of discipline, then it might take some time. But, you want your kid to know that you're on their team. Nina, your friend has something to tell you, right? So if I go to a child who hurt another child and I say, hey, Jennifer, you hurt Nina. Do you want to go over and see if she's okay? The child will maybe say yes, but they may not be ready to talk. And often what happens then is adults will again punish the child or say, oh, well, until you're ready to talk, then you do this. Well, we don't know. That child might be feeling a lot of shame. They may not know how to do it. So instead I could be with that child and say, hey, do you want me to go with you? And then I might say to Nina, hey, Nina, Jennifer has something she really wants to say to you, or she really wants to check in with you. And what that does is it builds my connection to both kids, and it also helps each child learn the strategies that they need to move forward. Now, if Nina says, I don't want to talk to Jennifer, she hurt me, I have to also be okay with that and say, yeah, you know what, Jennifer, Nina's not ready to talk right now, but I'll bet she'll be okay later. Maybe we could give her some space. Jennifer gets to learn what it means to respect someone else's feelings. Nina understands that her feelings are okay and it's okay for her to take a few minutes. And 9 times out of 10, they're playing together again in a few minutes without anybody having to have been made to feel really bad for what they did. Gosh, this cat. Here you go. Go on. All right. Decide what you will do and follow through. Oh, I already talked about that. Stop rescuing your kids. Big one, right? So stop rescuing your kids. So often we feel like we need to swoop in and help our children if they're having a hard emotion, right? But what do we want for our kids? We want them to be people who can tolerate hard feelings and feel okay after. So example of this. Let's say you have a beautiful date planned with your significant other and your child is crying and they don't want you to go and they don't want to be with the babysitter. Rather than maybe canceling your date, which sometimes happens, or even going and being like, oh, honey, it's okay. I'm going to stay here for 20 minutes longer. What you want to do is be able to say, hey, you know what? You're having a really hard time with this. You wish we would stay here all the time, all night long. What's that? Being kind, being loving, being empathetic. But you know what? We're going to go out and we're going to be back in time to tuck you in tonight. And so is going to take really good care of you. We love you. Goodbye. That may sound kind of hard to do, but think about it. What you're doing there is you're saying, you're going to be okay. I know that you really want us to stay, so that's empathy. You're going to be okay. It's really important that both of your parents get to have alone time together. We prioritize our relationship, and this other person can keep you safe. I'm also telling my child what they can expect. You can expect that we're going to be home in time to tuck you in tonight, and then I'm going to make sure that I do that. So then what am I teaching my kid? Hey, I always come home to you. I always do what I say as much as I can. You can trust me. All of those things are lessons, and so we don't need to rescue our children from hard emotions. These are not all things that are on the form, but rather things I want to share with you, right? So focusing on the process. We talked about praise. So rather than always saying, good job, what I want to do is not focus on the product, right? This is the most beautiful drawing ever, but rather the process. Wow, you're working really hard at coloring that page in. What I'm doing there is I'm actually helping the child to understand that it's not about being perfect. It's about the process and how hard you work or how focused you are. Because again, research actually says that kids who are focused on external rewards like A's or praise, they tend to not be really big risk takers in learning. They tend to not be, perfectionists, right? But kids who are focusing on the the process, they tend to be people who are feeling really excited about learning. So I always give this example of if a kid is really into manatees, let's say, and they don't really know a lot about them, and a teacher says, hey, you can write a report on anything you want in the whole wide world. A kid who is focused on the product or getting that A or the praise from parents or from the teacher might go, oh, I really want to write about manatees, but I know so much about toucans. I'm going to write my report on toucans because that is definitely going to be an A. As opposed to a child it's all about the process could go, oh, you know what? I can't wait to learn as much as I can about manatees. I'm going to do everything I can to learn. And it's about that excitement as opposed to the product. Example, right? It really teaching kids there's a whole lot between good and bad. So focusing on the product, sorry, I get confused between those, kind of gives the idea that it's like there's a right way and a wrong way and there's nothing in between. We don't want to do that because there are so many different ways to be successful. We want to teach resiliency by modeling it. We talked about learning from our mistakes and trying things that we may fail at. Like, how can you have a fun, exciting life if you're only staying in the safe zone? So we want to give our kids that experience of trying new things. And finally, give yourself a break and remember to be human. Be nice to yourself. I think, so let me look really quickly because I think on here there may be something else. I know what it is. It's climb the ladder. So in the second row here, and this is a newer handout, so I'd forgotten to put this in, but climb the ladder, what is that? Climb the ladder is the idea that we want to teach our children in steps. So often, again, it's really easy to get in the trap of thinking, my kid should know how to do this, or the kid next door is doing this. Why is my kid not doing this? So rather than imagining that a child should be able to learn something really quickly and easily, we want to think about it a ladder. So if your child is at the bottom of the ladder and what you want them to be able to do is at the top, it's about going up rung by rung. So let me give you an example. If your child is at the bottom, and sometimes I even draw this out. So here's a ladder, and here's your child at the bottom, and let's say it's cleaning up. So all the way at the top of the ladder is cleaning up independently. That's where I want my kid to be able to be. Every day I want you to keep your room clean. Well, how do I climb up the ladder? So rather than expecting my child to jump to the top of the ladder, I might think, where is my kid at now? My kid now, they really can't clean up at all, and everything is always a mess. Well, maybe what I'll do then is to make sure that I am creating a time that we clean up together, and then we'll come up together with a strategy. So maybe it's boxes, one big box, and everything goes in that one big box. That's the first rung, and I'm going to do it with my child. The second rung might be, okay, now they're doing a really good job on cleaning up with one big box, and with me there, so I'm going to not be as helpful. I'm going to expect them to do it, and I'll just stay in the room. Oh, they're doing a really good job with that. Now I'm going to actually put two boxes. One might be stuffed animals, and the rest are for other toys. And so what I'm doing is going rung by rung by rung. This may sound tiring, but it's actually a pretty good strategy for creating bite-sized manageable chunks that are going to pay off. Because once that skill is learned, it's really learned, right? So the other thing I want to say is, let's say you go up a rung and you go, oh, I put two boxes out. It was going really well with one box, and now it's just like a total disaster. All that means is you just need to go back a rung. And so once, it's just telling you you're going too fast with that skill. So just go back one rung. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean your child is a failure. It just means you need to kind of take a little bit longer, and maybe even that there's another rung between those two. I hope that that's helpful. Anytime you're teaching a child a new skill, I love this idea of I do it, we do it, you do it. So when I'm teaching that child a new skill, I might say, you know what? It's time to clean up. So I'm going to put all of the things in this big box. I do it myself. Let's do it together. We're going to do it together. And then I might say, can you put all of the things in the box? They've seen me do it. We've done it together. Now they're ready to move on to doing it on their own, perhaps. And so I do it, we do it, you do it is a great example, whether it be cleaning up, whether it be something more, all the way up to working with adults, right? If I'm trying to show my partner how to change a diaper, for example, I can't just be like, you're doing it wrong. What I want to do is go, okay, first let me show you how to do it. Okay, yeah, let's do it together. Yep, you pull that side over to that side and you do it this way, and here's how you tape it. That's the front, that's the back. Let's do it together. And then I might say to my partner, hey, you go ahead and do it now. I'm going to watch them do it. Now, if they can't do it at all, that means I went up a rung too far, and I just go one back. Let's do it together again. Once they're really confident in that, they can move up a rung. And that is it. So those are all of the tools that I wanted to share with you. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for sitting here in my office full of all sorts of stuff behind me and listening to the tools. If you want to stay in touch with me or get in touch with me, I'm at parentingpass@gmail.com. You can also reach me at aki@parentingpass.com. That's my phone number there. And one of the things I would love for you to do, if you're not already a part of the Parenting Revolution Facebook group, go ahead and just go online, search for the Positive Parenting Revolution, and join the Facebook group. That's a great way to stay in touch every day and to join a group of like-minded parents. And then finally, I'm at parentingpass.com if you want to learn more. But yes, please shoot me an email. Let me know how this landed for you. Let me know if you have any questions. And I am just so excited about you being part of this community, about wanting to grow and parent through connection. And again, if you have any questions for me, feel free to get in touch. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.